New York City pulsed beneath the October sky, lights flickering like restless hearts, each one hiding a story, a secret, a longing. The air had a quiet bite, the kind that hinted winter was coming, but hadn't yet decided to settle in. In his luxury limousine, Liam Carter stared out the tinted window, his reflection almost a stranger. He was a man who had everything: power, wealth, respect, and yet tonight he felt empty. His jet had landed just an hour ago from Tokyo, where he'd closed another $1 million deal. His name was in business magazines, his face on billboards. But none of it mattered tonight. The success, the suits, the endless applause, it all rang hollow in his chest. He needed silence. He needed warmth. He needed something real. But instead, his assistant had scheduled him for a charity gala held in the glass-wrapped penthouse of one of his own hotels, a place where people smiled too hard, laughed too loud, and hid knives behind their compliments. He almost didn't go. But fate doesn't ask for permission. Inside the penthouse, soft jazz floated like perfume in the air. Guests sipped golden drinks, murmuring about investments and politics. Liam entered quietly, unnoticed, in a black tailored suit that hugged his broad shoulders and contrasted his cold blue eyes. And then he saw her. She was across the room, balancing a tray of wine glasses with quiet grace. Her black uniform was simple, yet she wore it like armor. Her posture was straight, but her eyes, God, her eyes, were deep emeralds full of storms. Her hair, golden and soft, was tied back, though a few curls had escaped and danced along her neck. She didn't speak much. She didn't need to. There was something about her, a softness in a world of sharp edges. Liam couldn't look away. And when her eyes finally met his, the world stopped. For one heartbeat, the air stilled. The music faded. The crowd disappeared. It was just her and him. She blinked quickly, looking down, cheeks flushed pink. He took a step forward, his feet moving before his thoughts caught up. She turned slightly, as if deciding whether to flee or stay. He reached her just as she steadied her tray on a table. "Hi," he said, his voice low, careful, as if not to scare her away. "Good evening, sir," she replied, eyes not quite meeting his. "Do you always call men sir who look at you like they've seen heaven and hell in the same breath?" She laughed softly. The sound stirred something in his chest that had been frozen for too long. "I call anyone in a suit, sir," she said, her lips curving into a shy smile. He smiled back. "Then allow me to introduce myself, Liam." "I know," she said quietly. "You own this place." He raised an eyebrow. "And you are?" She hesitated. "Ella. No last name, just Ella." And somehow that was enough. Over the next hour, they found each other in moments. In the way her hand brushed his when she handed him a drink, in the way he lingered near her tray as if she were the only person who mattered. They turned to face each other. There was a question in the air, and the answer came in silence. His hand reached out, brushing a curl from her cheek. She didn't pull away. One kiss turned into two into eternity. That night wasn't about lust. It was about connection, fragile and terrifying. It was slow, tender. She trembled when he touched her, and he knew. This was her first time. "Are you sure?" he had whispered against her skin. "Yes," she breathed, tears threatening the corners of her eyes. "With you, yes." He held her as if she would break, and in some ways she already had. They didn't talk about jobs or titles or money. They talked about dreams, about fears. She told him about the night sky in her hometown. He told her about the loneliness of being admired but never truly known. Somewhere between the soft moans and gentle laughter, two souls stitched together for one night, under a sky that had seen too many broken people try to feel whole. But when Liam woke up, the pillow beside him was cold. The sheet folded. The room silent. She was gone. No note, no name, no goodbye. Only the echo of her laughter in his mind, and the haunting warmth of the only night that had ever meant something. Ella Morgan walked down the narrow hallway of the budget motel in rural Pennsylvania, her shoes worn, her uniform faded from too many washes, and her heart heavier than the laundry cart she pushed. She was only 22, but life had aged her far beyond her years. Her hands bore the quiet calluses of sacrifice, formed not from time, but from love. She wasn't just a maid. She was a sister, a caretaker, a fighter. By day, she cleaned bathrooms and scrubbed floors in hotels most people wouldn't think twice about. By night, she worked part-time at a diner, smiling at strangers while hiding her exhaustion behind chipped eyeliner and borrowed lipstick. Back home, in a small two-bedroom house that still smelled like her late mother's perfume, lived the two people who meant everything to her. Her younger brother Josh, only 11, sweet, smart, and obsessed with space documentaries. And her grandmother Lorraine, once a nurse, now battling early Alzheimer's, whose memory slipped a little more each week. Ella paid the bills. She bought the groceries. She tucked Josh into bed, helped him with homework, and held her grandmother's hand on nights she cried, thinking Ella was her daughter. And through it all, Ella never complained. Because complaining didn't pay rent. Dreaming didn't heal the sick. And falling in love, that was a luxury she simply couldn't afford. Until that night. Liam Carter, the billionaire with tired eyes and a quiet soul. She hadn't meant to talk to him. She knew the rules. Maids stay invisible. But he had looked at her like she was made of stars, not dust. He had spoken to her with warmth, not arrogance. And for one night, just one night, she wasn't a maid. She was a woman. She had been kissed like she mattered, touched like she was precious, held like she was irreplaceable. But afterward, panic. When morning came, reality flooded her like icy water. That had she done? She wasn't supposed to be in that suite. She wasn't supposed to fall into his arms. And she certainly wasn't supposed to fall asleep on his chest, feeling more protected than she ever had in her entire life. Her heart told her to stay. Her mind screamed at her to run. Because what if he woke up and realized who she really was? What if he saw past the soft moment and only saw a maid who had no business being in his world? Would he think it was all a game? Would he accuse her of trying to trap him? Would he look at her with the same pity and disgust the rich always saved for people like her? She couldn't bear the risk. So before the sun fully rose, she slipped out of bed, put her uniform back on, and left with nothing but a trembling heart and the taste of regret. She didn't leave a note. She didn't dare leave her real name. She didn't even take the rose he'd brought from the rooftop garden, though she wanted to. That week, she asked to transfer to a sister hotel in another state. She gave up her job at the luxury location and went back to the shadows. Back to the mop. Back to survival. Back to pretending that night had never happened. But at night, she remembered. His hand cupping her cheek. The way he asked, "Are you okay?" more than once. The moment she confessed she was a virgin, and how he didn't flinch or gloat. He just whispered, "Then I'll make sure your first time is gentle, if you're sure." And she was. Not because he was rich, not because of the penthouse, but because for once, someone had made her feel seen. So she buried that memory deep inside. Like a seed she could never water, because she believed someone like him could never want someone like her. But what Ella didn't know was that Liam Carter, the man who could buy anything, had spent months trying to find the one thing he couldn't purchase. Her. He never forgot the curve of her smile, the tremble in her voice, the way she touched his arm like he was something fragile. He tried to tell himself it was a passing moment. He dated models. He smiled at cameras, but nothing felt real. He had memorized the scent of her shampoo. He kept the single earring she'd accidentally left behind in his drawer. He had security check footage, only to find her face turned or blurred in every frame. She was gone, but not from his heart, not from the space in his soul where her laugh still echoed, not from the sleepless nights where he whispered her name into the dark. Ella. He didn't know her last name, but he knew what her love had felt like, and somehow, someday, he knew he would find her. Even if it meant searching the world, even if it meant tearing down the walls between their two very different lives. Because for the first time ever, he didn't want a maid. He didn't want a fantasy. He wanted her. Liam Carter had built a billion-dollar empire by never giving up. He was relentless, focused, unshakably precise. But when it came to her, He was lost. From the moment he woke up alone in that penthouse bed, the sheets still warm from where she had lain, Liam couldn't breathe right. He searched the room, called the front desk, checked the cameras. Nothing. It was as if the woman with emerald eyes had been a dream. Too perfect to be real, too gentle to belong to a world like his. But she had been real. He could still feel the ghost of her fingers in his hair, still hear her soft gasp as she whispered his name like it meant something. Ella. That one name was all he had. No last name, no number, no trace. She had used a fake name to check in. She had avoided cameras with the quiet precision of someone who needed to stay hidden. The more Liam searched, the more he realized she hadn't disappeared by accident. She'd chosen to vanish. But why? He questioned staff discreetly. Most of them couldn't remember her, and those who did only described her as polite, quiet, and hard-working. She was sweet, one said. Kind eyes, always kept her head down. Another added, she never talked much about herself. You'd think she didn't want to be remembered. That hurt more than it should have, because Liam remembered everything. The way her lips trembled when he kissed her. The way she clutched the sheet around her chest as they talked in the early morning light. The way she paused, just for a heartbeat, before leaving, as if part of her wanted to stay. And now she was gone. He hired a private investigator, a man known for finding people who didn't want to be found. But even he came up short. No digital footprint, the investigator said. Either she's a ghost, or she's hiding for a reason. Liam stopped dating, stopped smiling. He buried himself in work, trying to outrun the ache in his chest. Every time he entered one of his hotels, he found himself scanning the staff, looking for her hair, her walk, that soft, nervous laugh. He found shadows of her in other women, but they were never her. He went to charity galas and board meetings, took long flights and closed million-dollar contracts. But his nights always ended the same. Sitting alone in bed, staring at the ceiling, remembering the only night that had ever made him feel human. Months passed. The world moved on. But Liam's obsession only grew. He started personally overseeing more of his hotel expansions, hoping, secretly, desperately, that fate would throw him a bone. And then, Pennsylvania. A small-town project, a modest hotel renovation near the mountains. He didn't even want to be there. But something instinct fate madness pulled him in. He walked through the nearly finished lobby, hands in his pockets, nodding at workers as his project manager droned on about floor plans and electrical permits. They passed the kitchen doors. Someone pushed through with a tray of food. And Liam stopped. Everything stopped. Time, noise, breath. It was her. She wore the same black uniform. Her hair was tied back loosely, but a golden curl had escaped, just like before. Her lips were parted, slightly dry. Ella. The tray in her hands shook. Then, crash. Plates shattered. Soup spilled across the tile. Gasps. Movement. The kitchen buzzed in shock. But Liam didn't care. He stepped forward slowly, like approaching a frightened animal in the woods. Ella! His voice cracked. She looked like she might faint. Her hand covered her mouth, tears already shining in her eyes. He could see it all in a single glance. Shock, guilt, fear, longing. Someone rushed over to clean the mess. A manager scolded her. Ella, are you okay? You're shaking. What happened? But she didn't answer. Couldn't. Because the man she'd spent months trying to forget, the man who had haunted her every dream, was standing right in front of her. Alive, real, angry, hopeful? She couldn't tell. I looked for you, Liam said, eyes locked on hers. Everywhere. Her lips parted, but no words came. How could she explain? How could she tell him she ran because she was scared of being loved by someone so far above her world? That she was a maid, not a mystery. That she didn't think she was enough. Her knees trembled. His chest rose and fell, each breath heavier than the last. Finally, she whispered, I didn't think you'd remember me. Liam stepped closer, heart pounding, voice rough. I forgot 1,000 faces in my life, but I never forgot yours. The air outside the hotel kitchen was still and cold, the kind that made breath visible and silence louder. Ella ran out through the back doors, her footsteps echoing on the gravel path behind the hotel. Her hands trembled as she wiped them on her apron. The image of Liam's face burned into her memory like fire against her skin. She didn't expect him to follow, but he did. Of course he did. "Ella," his voice called gently behind her. She didn't turn, couldn't. Her heart was pounding so loudly in her ears it almost drowned out the ache in her chest. Liam stepped closer, slowly, his shoes crunching against the gravel. "Why did you leave?" She swallowed hard, still facing away. Her voice cracked as she replied, "Because I had to." "Why?" he asked again, softer this time. A man who had every reason to be angry was instead standing before her, hurt, not furious, just wounded. She finally turned. Her eyes were glassy, her lips trembling as she whispered, "Because I'm just a maid, Liam. That's all I've ever been. That's all I'll ever be." His expression didn't shift, no judgment, no surprise, only heartbreak. "I knew," she continued, "that once you woke up and remembered who you were and who I was, you'd regret it. I couldn't. I couldn't let you look at me with disappointment in your eyes, so I left before you had the chance." Liam stepped even closer now, closing the painful distance between them. "You think I didn't know?" he said quietly. She blinked. "What?" "I knew," he said. "Not at first, maybe. But I figured it out. I saw the way you avoided the cameras, the way you moved around like you didn't want to be seen. And that night, you were scared. Not of me, but of yourself, of what it meant to be close." Her lips trembled. "But I'm not like you!" "Good," he said, interrupting softly. "Because the people like me, they forgot how to feel. You reminded me." They sat under the big maple tree behind the hotel, its leaves a fiery mix of gold and crimson, matching the emotional autumn in both their hearts. Ella finally opened up, fully. She told him about her brother Josh and how she read to him every night about planets and stars. About her grandmother Lorraine, whose hands once held steady as a nurse but now shook with confusion and fear. About her mother, who died too young, and left behind a girl who had to grow up too fast. She told him about the 2 jobs, the sleepless nights, the moments she wanted to give up but couldn't because too many people needed her to keep going. And when she told him through tears, "That's why I ran, because people like me don't get fairy tale endings," he reached out and cradled her face in his palms. "You don't get fairy tales," he whispered, "because no one ever stayed long enough to write one with you." A single tear slid down her cheek. He wiped it away with his thumb. "But I'm not going anywhere," he said. "Not unless you tell me to." She shook her head slowly, unable to speak. "You think your life makes you less," Liam said. "But it's what makes you more. You love harder, care deeper, survive stronger. You've seen real pain, and you still choose kindness. That's not weakness, Ella. That's everything." She broke then, not from sorrow, but from relief. Because for the first time, someone saw the weight she carried and didn't try to run from it. They sat together for a long time. No more secrets, no more lies, just truth, raw, imperfect, and breathtaking. She leaned her head on his shoulder, and he wrapped his arm around her like he'd been waiting to do it for months. No luxury suite, no champagne, just 2 hearts, tangled in the most human way. And as the wind rustled the leaves above them, Liam whispered, "Let me stay. Not because you need saving, but because you deserve someone who chooses you every day." And finally, Ella let herself believe it might be true. They say love is strongest when it's tested. Liam and Ella's love was about to be thrown into fire. It started with a single blurry photo. Someone snapped it from a hotel window. Liam Carter, billionaire hotel magnate, sitting beneath a maple tree in a small-town hotel parking lot, with a maid in uniform resting her head on his shoulder. At first, it was nothing more than curiosity. Who is she? New girlfriend? Another scandal? But by the end of the week, the questions had turned into daggers. And those daggers were aimed straight at Ella. The media circus erupted. Liam Carter's secret love affair with a hotel maid. Sleeping her way to the top? From mop to mansion, gold digger, or Cinderella? And underneath those headlines, hiding like poison in the comment sections, were even uglier words. She was white, but that didn't protect her from the hate. The classism was vicious, the judgment unrelenting. She probably planned it. Of course she's poor. Just look at her hands. He'll drop her once he comes to his senses. Girls like that ruin powerful men. Ella saw it all. She didn't mean to, but it was impossible not to. Social media exploded with her face, zoomed in and filtered through cruelty. They called her things she never imagined strangers would say. They tore her down not for what she did, but for who she was. For being poor, for being plain, for daring to love a man she was not good enough for. Behind the closed doors of boardrooms, the judgment didn't stop. Some of Liam's investors pulled out. Brand partners called in concern. There were whispers that his name was becoming too controversial. Even friends in high society backed away. Some told him to clean up the image. Others said it wasn't worth the drama. And yet, Liam didn't flinch. He stood in front of the press outside one of his flagship hotels, microphones and cameras flashing. He adjusted his cufflink, looked out into a sea of skeptics, and said calmly but clearly, "If I lose everything standing next to her, then I never deserved any of it in the first place." There was silence. Not from fear, but from truth. The kind of truth that broke through the noise. Ella watched the press conference from a small break room, her hands shaking as she held a paper cup of coffee that had long gone cold. When she heard his words, those simple, unwavering words, she dropped the cup and sat on the floor, crying into her palms. But these weren't tears of sorrow. They were the tears of a girl who had always felt like someone's second choice. Tears of someone who'd grown up apologizing for her dreams. Tears of a woman who, for once in her life, was being chosen, fully, publicly, proudly. Later that night, Liam found her sitting on the back steps of the hotel, staring up at the stars she used to wish upon as a child. He knelt beside her. "I saw the video," she whispered. "You didn't have to say that." "Yes, I did," he replied, "and I meant every word." "But you'll lose so much," she said, her voice barely holding steady. "The investors, your reputation, the press." "I don't care. You say that now. I'll say it every day for the rest of my life if I have to." He took her hand. "They can take the company. They can slander my name. But they can't touch what we have. They didn't earn it. We did." She looked at him, her eyes glassy again. "Why me, Liam? Why not someone easier? Someone they'd approve of?" He smiled, touching her cheek. "Because when I'm with you, I'm not a billionaire. I'm just a man. And when you look at me, I feel like I can finally breathe." Days passed, then weeks. The media frenzy burned hot, but like all fires, it eventually died down. Not because the world grew kinder, but because Liam and Ella never gave them more fuel. They didn't break up. They didn't fade away. They stood together, shoulder to shoulder, hands locked even when the world pulled at their fingers. Ella never pretended to be someone else, and in a world obsessed with fantasy, there's something revolutionary about real love. Because the girl in the maid's uniform didn't just walk into a billionaire's life and change his heart. She reminded the world that worth isn't measured in bank accounts, silk dresses, or designer heels. Sometimes it's measured in how you hold someone when the world wants to break them, in the strength it takes to believe in someone who's spent their life unseen. And Liam, he didn't fall for a maid. He fell for a woman who loved with her entire heart, and never once asked for more than the truth. The sun rose slowly over the hills of Pennsylvania, painting the sky in gentle hues of gold and rose. The morning air was quiet, like it was holding its breath, for today wasn't just another day. It was the day Ella Morgan would walk down the aisle, not in a cathedral dripping in diamonds, not in some ballroom full of empty smiles and polished lies, but in a garden, humble, wild, breathtaking. Beneath a white archway wrapped in soft green ivy and small, hand-picked wildflowers, stood Liam Carter in a simple navy suit, no tie. No spotlight, no press, just him, just her, just love. The chairs were filled not with billionaires or business elites, but with people who mattered. Ella's best friend from the diner, an older hotel maid who once brought her soup on a night she worked with a fever. Liam's old driver who had watched him grow from lonely to loved. And at the start of the aisle, wearing a little suit, his chest puffed with pride, stood Josh, Ella's little brother, now 12. He extended his arm and grinned up at his sister. "You ready?" he asked, his voice shaking slightly. Ella nodded, fighting tears. More than ever. And together they walked. There was no orchestra. Just the soft strum of a guitar played by a local teenager Ella once tutored in English after her shifts. Liam's eyes never left her. As she drew near, he blinked away tears that had no shame. This wasn't a wedding of wealth. It was a wedding of worth. Ella's dress was second-hand, altered by a neighbor who was once a seamstress. Her veil had belonged to her grandmother, who, though confused by names and faces, still clapped with joy. As they stood before the officiant, hands joined, their vows didn't mention forever or perfection. They spoke instead of fighting together, of choosing each other daily, of promising truth even when it hurt, and kindness, especially when it did. "I never wanted perfect," Ella whispered, voice thick with emotion. "I just wanted real, and with you, I have it." "I spent my life being admired," Liam replied. "But with you, I finally feel understood." And when they kissed, it was not just for them. It was for everyone who had ever been told they were too poor, too plain, too unworthy to be loved fully. It was for the forgotten, the invisible, the working hands behind luxury doors. That night, they didn't fly off to Europe or dine in Michelin-star restaurants. 6 months later, the first center of their foundation opened. It was called Worth More, not after themselves, but after every girl who'd ever been told she wasn't enough. The center provided education, training, and support for young women from working-class backgrounds, maids, waitresses, daughters of single mothers, girls with big dreams and empty wallets, girls who needed someone to tell them that where they came from didn't define where they could go. Ella sat with every girl who walked in. She didn't wear heels. She didn't hide her scars. She shared her story, how she fell in love, yes, but more importantly, how she chose to believe she was worth loving. And slowly, people began to listen. The media changed. Not overnight, but over time. Headlines softened. Critics fell quiet. Even the cruelest voices were silenced by the undeniable proof that something beautiful had bloomed, where only judgment had once grown. Liam and Ella began to receive invitations again. Talk shows, panels, interviews. They declined most. They didn't need applause anymore. They had purpose. They had peace. And they had each other. One evening, as they sat on the porch of their quiet countryside home, Liam turned to Ella and asked, "Do you regret it? Any of it?" She smiled, resting her head on his shoulder. "Only that I didn't believe in myself sooner," she whispered. "But you helped me remember that love isn't about being from the same world. It's about building a new one together." Liam kissed her forehead. "And I'd burn mine down again for you." Their story wasn't a fairy tale. It was something better. A wake-up call to a society that often forgets that love doesn't ask for permission, background checks, or bloodlines. Love asks only one question. "Will you choose me as I am?" And Liam did, and so did Ella. Not just once, but every single day,